Welcome back to Cirrius Talk. I'm Greg Banks, and today we're diving into one of the most important shifts in the AI agent conversation, context engineering, because having an agent isn't the win, fitting it the right context is. I'm thankful today to be joined by Tim Harding and Gavin Franklin. Thanks for being here and coming along with us. Let's jump right in. Happy New Year. Welcome back, Tim and Gavin. Good to have you on the show today. How were the holidays and presents and fireworks and all the stuff over the last couple of weeks for you guys?
Yeah, good to be back. Hope you had a good holiday season as well, Greg. Yeah, it was good. Nice and relaxing, just the way we want it. So how about yours, Gavin?
Same here. I got to host everything, so I didn't have to leave, go anywhere. Definitely my preference. So I had a really relaxing holidays for sure.
Hey, Gavin, remind me, you're in Indiana, right?
Yep, in Indiana.
I come really close to calling you over the holidays on that. I'm not sure if you're an Indiana fan, but man, with some great football. Been some really good football. Fun to watch.
Yeah, when IU's doing well, the Colts are doing bad. So it's a give and take.
Yeah. Tracking the weather with our teams scattered all over the country, kind of what's going on weather-wise. It's supposed to be 72 here tomorrow.
That's great.
No surprise. I've been sick for 2 weeks. It's 30 and 40-degree temperature swings every couple of days here. But Tim's been to Georgia. He knows what it's like. Good deal. All right, so let's continue our AI journey today. Is just a guy who's been around a minute. I am always excited when things I already know come back around. The topic we're going to get into today is context. Context matters. That matters in so many things in life, but in AI, no surprise, context matters a lot. So it's a topic that's been pretty hot the last couple of 3 weeks. I think AI Daily Brief maybe covered a little bit of this over the last couple of weeks as well, but look forward to digging into this with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting topic, and I think you're spot on. There's nothing new under the sun. Things tend to have their way of just coming back around and just under different terminology. And I think ultimately when we start looking at context engineering, similar as when we looked at kind of MCPs and skills and agents in one of our previous episodes, we'll see the same thing. Sound best practices and some things that have been around for a while are coming back in different ways. But yeah, what is context engineering? I think we just start with that. And then, I know Gavin would love to kind of get your initial thoughts on that as well. But I think context engineering is kind of the natural evolution from, what people probably heard a year ago or even 9 months ago, which was prompt engineering. So engineering prompts to give kind of the right set of instructions to an LLM for that agent then, which is really good at understanding language and providing responses to be able to deal with that and provide usable response back to the user. Well, context engineering is quite a bit more involved than just working with the prompt. And really what led to this transformation is the evolution of MCP protocol and agents be able to connect to other systems and to have multiple tools and to be able to use skills to programmatically execute processes. These changes really over the last 6 months have just had this explosion of potential data sets or context that you could bring in to an LLM to make decisions. So ultimately, it's kind of turned into an art form or almost its own area of architecture design or data architecture, where context engineering is managing the tokens, managing the data coming into the agent that's going to use tokens to generate a response, to make sure you're providing the right data, the right amount of data, not too much and not too little, as we'll see coming up here. And so why does this matter for business users? We'll kind of recap this at the end too. Well, it matters because I think a lot of people are so focused as we need agents, we need agents, we need agents, or we need clean data, we need clean data, we need clean data. Ultimately, the most important thing you need to be looking for is we need to have rich context and provide the right context to agents. And you need to be looking at adding capabilities and adding context into your agent architecture. It's almost more important than looking at what other agents to add to your agent architecture. But yeah, Gavin, what are your kind of initial thoughts there too? And I know we kind of like made a little framework to kind of walk people through as well. So maybe we kind of step into that as well and kind of use that to guide the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of add on to what we were saying, I would say, context is king when it comes to agent building. And if you back it up a little bit, back when LLMs first launched, they're now slightly more agentic out of the box, going to ChatGPT than they were when they first launched. But what you saw then was the agent is only aware of whatever text you provided or the LLM. So it's not going to be able to go in and search your database when you provided a prompt. It'll say, I don't have access to that. I don't know what that is. But as we moved into agents, just like you were saying, allowing those MCP servers to make those connections, all of a sudden context became really powerful and incredibly important, not just with the prompts, but with the data that's provided, with the memory of the agents. And yeah, we definitely have a decent amount to jump into when it comes to the context side.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think when we refer to context, there's kind of like a corpus or set of common things that are involved with agents that are kind of specific types of context that could be provided to the agent that ultimately gets added to the system prompt. You want to kind of walk through kind of what those are. I think there's really kind of like 5 main types of context that could come in. Then there's lots of different layers underneath that. We can walk through each one individually.
Yeah. So the 5 primary types of context now are going to be your user prompts. This is the actual engagement with the agent. Your system prompts, so these are the prompts that live within the agent itself. The user and agent memory, so the engagement between the user and the agent keeping track of those things it needs to pull that data into itself in order to act appropriately. And then you have what I would refer to as the RAG pipeline, where you're supporting documents. So this is the documents that you might have that feed into the agent to give it more context over the specific thing it's trying to accomplish. And then I would categorize the 5th category as other. There's a ton of things that you could pull into context, particularly around things in the web or maybe your specific databases. So pretty much your primary 4 are the ones we covered, and then there's a whole host of things you can add to context as well.
And I think a lot of our audience probably knows this already if you've been following agents, but if you don't, RAG refers to retrieval augmented generation. So that's kind of referring to being able to grab data from other sources that's curated and put into the right format for an agent to use. So, but yeah, I think where do we want to start, Gavin? Which one do we want to dive into first?
Yeah, let's jump into user prompts. So I think this is the most familiar one to people, right? So when it comes to even LLMs, this is the input that you're providing to the agent. So if you're engaging with an agent, maybe it's through Slack, maybe it's through Teams, maybe it's through like an actual hosted UI somewhere on the web. This is what you're typing in. And this is probably the most important piece of context, I would argue, because it is fundamental. Now, to that being said as well, some agents may not actually need user interaction, but those that do, this is your entry point. This is what kicks off that loop.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, obviously, very critical piece. And, I think it's goes without saying, the user, if you're talking or interacting with an agent, you got to give it pretty explicit instructions. But I actually think a major change with this too, like even 6 months ago in mid 2025 and early 2025, people were talking about like the art of prompting really well and structuring your prompts in a particular way for the model to like give you what you want. I think with some of the releases of the newest models we have with like Claude Opus 4.5 or ChatGPT 5.2, or you've got, Gemini 3.0, like the need to be very structured or like organized in your prompts is kind of going away. These LLMs have such larger context windows now, and they're really good at parsing out and understanding intent. So if you've got spelling mistakes or you don't prompt it in a certain way where you tell it to not do something rather than saying what to do, like it's better at figuring that out. So I think that's been a major change. Like it's more forgiving. You still need to have kind of the raw, what do you want to have happen? And you want to provide details, but kind of how it's structured probably is like less important.
Yeah, so just kind of following along on the example as we go through each of these context windows, looking at like if you're a roofing company and you want to put a service agent on your website, right? So this would just be a chat window for your customers to engage with your service agent on, and the prompts would be whatever it is they put into that window.
Right. Yep. And we'll kind of keep coming back to that example as we kind of go through. So outside of the actual user prompt, kind of next is system prompts. So and that could either be one or multiple markdown files. It could be other formats too, but typically markdown is kind of the best practice. It's pretty easy to generate using AI to generate the markdown for you. But what are some of the keys, considerations there in terms of when we're collecting and building context to the agent with the system prompt piece?
Yeah, so with system prompts, this is really in the actual agent engineering side of the house. So when it comes to the agent, I think of system prompts in 2 different sections, right? So your primary system prompts are going to be core to the agent itself. It's going to be contained, and it's going to be what the agent utilizes to maybe build its personality. Alternative to this, you could also store some of your system prompts externally. I know we've been having these conversations about what that might look like with our internal agents recently, but what that does is it gives you the power to kind of iterate on your markdown files, iterate on your agent behavior without redeploying your agent entirely. So this is why we consider that a piece of context. Both the internal and external pieces are context as well.
Yeah, I think that's where like the concept of skills becomes really powerful, where you can have a skill for your agent to dynamically determine what system prompt or markdown file to use. So you can actually have a single agent with multiple personalities or multiple ways that it could interact based on the user request, which I think could become pretty powerful. And I think that's something that people really just now in the last kind of 3 months are really realizing the some of the ramifications and benefits of that. And what's awesome with that too is it's something that's very straightforward to build, right? Like it's a markdown file that you can dynamically call. It's not something that you have to go invest a ton of time and a ton of effort to develop. A lot of these things can be pretty light lifts to kind of implement or add to your agent to really make them more dynamic based on what they need to do for end users.
Yeah, I would argue too that just like any software, agents are going to be something that you will need to go back to improve upon over the years. And this is a prime area, like the prime candidate for what do I need to improve? That and probably the LLM as the models get better, right? So this is kind of your first entry point in investigation that, hey, something might be going wrong within my agent. How can I improve its performance? Markdown files would be the first place I start.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like using the example that the same way you have a manager with people, you have to manage agents. A system prompt is essentially your management expectations, your written expectations to the agent on how you expect them to act. And that needs to get systematically reviewed and updated based on performance. And if the agent isn't performing in particular use cases, you need to document it. You need to update the system prompt and tell it what's expected and how it's supposed to act. Perfect. So then we kind of get to maybe where it gets a little bit more involved, which is the RAG pipeline. So retrieval augmented generated pipeline. So data pipelines from multiple sources to get to a usable state for the agent. What are some key takeaways or things that business leaders need to be considering there?
Yeah, I think what you were saying earlier with the context of an agent, when it comes to what do we do first? The question is, what documents do we have? What data do we have stored? What visibility do we have into our processes from a document perspective? Because that's really the RAG pipeline, right? So you look at how can we get our documented processes into somewhere that the agent itself can access. Without that context, you're really just relying on those markdown files and the agent behavior, things like that. So if you're looking to do something like that service agent that we were discussing earlier, this is where you would put in documents like inspection checklist, SOPs, insurance guidelines, all shared within your Google Drive, your SharePoint, wherever it is that the agent could potentially access this. So typically what you're going to see with the RAG pipeline is there's going to be a separate process that looks to whatever source it is that you're storing your documents, and it's breaking them up and making it easier for the agent to read. We call that vectorizing, and we're putting that into a database, and then MCP is communicating back and forth to that database as you utilize your agent, and the agent's determining this is going to be something that's really useful for the conversation.
Yep, absolutely. And how would that kind of look in terms of like the roofing agent example that we were talking about?
Yeah, so for the roofing agent, you're going, like, let's say your documents are stored in SharePoint. There'd be a separate process on the side that would be monitoring your SharePoint for any documents that get added to maybe a specific folder that you want your AI to have access to. It would then chunk that up, vectorize it, what we were talking about earlier, and the agent would basically look at the context of the prompt, look at the context of the MD files, possibly the memory, and it would go in and say, based off of what's being asked, I know that I'm looking for documents with this kind of discussion and this topic. So then it pulls those documents in. So you may be storing documents in there like checklists, roofing manuals, public insurance claims, things like that. That way it can provide a little bit more specific communication back and forth with the customer that is tailored to what you want to do as a company. You might have something that's like, this is how you train your service team to interact with clients. And now your agent can behave similarly because that's the outline process.
Yeah, and I think another really interesting thing to keep in mind here is that, I think even up to not too long ago, if you had a lot of your data sitting in like PDFs or image files, that could be a monster to kind of get usable and into your systems to actually be able to use that data and parse it apart. But there's so many different tools available now when you're building your data pipeline to parse those apart and get those into usable formats for AI agents, that if you've got a lot of unstructured data, don't think that your data has to be in perfect usable format today. There's a lot more methods now to get unstructured data into the right spot for your agent to be able to use it for context. But all right, so then we kind of shift to kind of the fifth area that we had, Gavin, which was other external tools. And so I think this could be a plethora of different things, but maybe walk through kind of what some of those are and what we got to keep in mind in terms of, other tool-based external context sources, agents could be using and what people need to keep in mind as they're building out their agent architecture.
Yeah, this could really be anything. I would say most of the time this is going to be web-based, either some sort of cloud-hosted platform or some sort of website that you want to pull information from, or public API. It could also be locally hosted stuff like on your own infrastructure. Maybe you have a database you want to pull data from specifically. So just to kind of cover an example of what some other things you could do with this service agent as a roofing company, you could retrieve information from your CRM or ERP about specific customer payments, about specific customer information, or try to collect data, like we're missing a phone number or an email from somebody. So it would have that knowledge to be able to look at your CRM and say, hey, we don't have an email for this customer that's contacting us. You could also look at claim-specific information, or you could go out to a public weather service API to check the weather on when they're trying to schedule the date, just to let them know, hey, by the way, it's looking like there's potential to rain that day, so this is what our cancellation policy looks like. So various different things that you can apply to your agents depending on the situation. Really powerful stuff here.
Yep, totally agree. And so kind of what are some of the key takeaways in general when we kind of look at everything together? I think there's kind of a general theme of like, all right, do we just grab as much context that we want and bring it all in? Or do we have to kind of be smart about what context we bring in? And what should people be keeping in mind there?
Yeah, definitely the latter, right? You want to be as small of a context window as possible for your AI agents. And the reason that is because the more context you bring in, the more likely the agent is to hallucinate, the more likely the agent is to reference maybe some context that you didn't intend for them to reference during that specific prompt or task that they're performing. What I would recommend is less is better. You really want to define a context window that is highly tailored to the specific task or the specific interaction that the agent is having. And the more time that you spend kind of grooming your context, whether it be your markdown files, whether it be the documents that you give the agent, whether it be setting up your memory, it really goes miles in how the agent delivers the type of outcome that you're looking for. So keep those context windows small and take time to make sure that the content you're delivering the agent is quality.
Yeah. Yep, definitely agree. I always like using the example too of like, if you're giving instructions to an agent, it's like giving instructions to a human. Like if I'm giving instructions to a person and I ramble for an hour in no particular order, and I just kind of go with like all the different things I want them to do, and some of that might be relevant, some might not be relevant. The chance of them doing something that's actually not in alignment with this very specific intent that I wanted to have happen is actually pretty high. It's not that they're like hallucinating or coming up with, so it's just I said a lot, and a lot of what I said probably conflicted with each other that could have been handled in like a dozen different ways. The same with the agent. If we're dumping in tons and tons of documents and tons of data, the chances of something conflicting within there pretty significant. And so I think by being very tightly focused on the context you're providing to the agent, same as if you're giving guidance to a human to go do a task, you want it focused on the key critical tasks you want to accomplish and what do you want the end state to look like. So very interesting. Well, yeah, no, I think great topic. I think there's going to be entire career fields or roles built specifically around this within the AI and AI agent space. I think a lot of data architecture is going to be focused within this too. So it'll be interesting to see if it continues to kind of carve out its own career field and space, or if it just gets subsumed into kind of the data and data architecture space. I think that's yet to be seen, but definitely something that anybody that's leveraging AI-driven systems or wants to drive AI-driven systems, whether you're on the business side or the technical side, you need to have a basic understanding of this, what it is, and kind of some key ways, things you need to keep in mind as you evolve your business. So great topic and something I'm sure we'll discuss in other episodes coming up. But yeah.
Yeah. It really sounds like context is to AI what expertise was to your physical agents 10 years ago, right? You wanted people with a lot of experience and knowledge and whatnot because you wanted to get the right answer as quickly as you possibly can. As we move towards AI, the risk you have is they don't have filters, right? AI is going to do exactly what you tell it to do. Context is allowing you to filter to give the most appropriate data set of information to the agent to pull from and give the most accurate response they possibly could. So yeah, it's just been interesting to watch things evolve. It's the opposite of Googling. Googling, you wanted everything to come in. With agents, you want only the right things to go out. So it's been a pretty neat thing to watch this news cycle evolve. But guys, thank you for your time today. There is an artifact for this. The topics that we covered today are broken down in a visual, and we will be sharing in the episode notes. But thank you guys for coming on and helping us bring light to this subject today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good one. All right, that's a wrap on today's episode of Cirrius Talk. If this helped you rethink how you're building AI agents, do me a favor, follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us a review. It's the fastest way to help more Salesforce and AI builders find the show. If you know someone building agents right now, share this episode with them, because more context is often the exact thing breaking their results. Your call to action, pick one agent you're working on this week and audit its context. Ask yourself, what can I remove? What can I tighten? What critical context is missing? Also, don't forget to check the show notes. We've linked recommended resources plus the visual artifact that breaks down today's context framework. And a special thank you to Jason Fowler for letting us use his song, Mystery Road. Thanks for listening today, and we'll see you next time.